This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. And this is Bonnie Bucqueroux with the Lansing Online News Radio Show. And I'm about to be joined by my co-host, Bill Castanier. And summer has hit, Bill.
It did. At least it hit Lansing.
It hit me very hard when I was in the hoop house, and it was 102 in there yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah, it does.
A lot of dehydration.
Get a little steamy. Next time I'm going to remember that and take a little more water with me. Yeah, you said you were up north, though, and it was actually chilly.
It was chilly yesterday up north, up in Harbor Springs, Petoskey area. I had a
So you
sweater on yesterday.
Went up to visit the rich folks. What'd you tell them?
I did. They read, so I went up there. I was at Bayview speaking to their library group.
They may be the ones keeping the hardcover book publishing industry alive.
No, they are having the same problem.
Oh, really?
There's, in fact, they're debating now how fast they should move into e-books, and they're debating it. It was yesterday.
How does a library loan out an e-book? Do they just pull it back when they're done so that you don't have to be overdue?
That's one way, but typically they drop dead the books after 2 weeks.
Oh, great!
There's a timeline built into them.
I remember reading a Richard Price novel once that I bought and finding out that the last page was missing. So I guess the same thing can happen to you electronically now if they decide to unplug you.
There was a book, I'm not going to remember the name because it won a National Book Award or the Pulitzer 2 years ago, and it was when they were really just starting to convert ebooks. Well, this book, the last third of it was in the form of a PowerPoint. It was a very strange book.
PowerPoint?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It was about music, I don't remember. But it did not transfer to an ebook.
Oh.
So people are buying, and they never bothered to look at it or anything. So people are buying the ebook and they go, that's the end of the book.
That's it? Yeah, that's all we get?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
So things are like that are happening. But the library up there they said they have an annual library sale. The donations are way down because people aren't reading
physical books
anymore.
Yeah.
Paperbacks, as we talked before, 40% of them now are ebooks.
Yeah.
Converted over to an ebook.
Well, the one author who's coming in this week hoping to sell some of his books, what is it, Wednesday night?
No, Tuesday night. Teardown. Gordon Young, the author of Teardown. It's about the Flint travails. Very well done book. It's another one of the ongoing. Aren't our urban areas bad?
Yes.
But he does present some hope. It's a well written book.
Flint's neglected. It's even in worse shape, I think, in many ways than Detroit has been over the years. But it's sort of been the ignored story. So he tells it, eh?
Yep, and Flint's smaller, and that's part of the reason. But it's the most dangerous city in America.
Yeah. And
kind of the premise is he going to buy a house in the most dangerous city in America? The answer is we don't know yet, because I can't tell you.
Okay.
But I talked about that book yesterday, and there were two people in the audience from Flint who took great umbrage.
Ooh, yeah.
Me described, because I don't know where they live in Flint, but it's not the places I've been, and I've been to Flint quite a bit. There are places in Flint that you cannot drive down the street.
Yeah.
I've been there. I mean, not because you can't. It's not passable.
Right.
So, I mean, it's pretty bad in some areas.
There's still some pretty good neighborhoods out but it's segregated.
Yeah, and that's what he writes about. He finds the good neighborhoods and the people that are holding on and trying to save what's left. And that's why I like the book. There's some hope in it.
Now, I worked with the Flint during the time that Bob Trajano was doing community policing experiments up in Flint. And the last time that I heard about what was happening in Flint was about 10 years ago. I was in line at a meeting, and I was listening to two people from the police department talk. And on the previous Saturday night, there had only been 2 officers on duty for a city that size, because the department has been so destroyed in terms of numbers. And it's just, and then between vacations and covering shifts and all those kinds of things. I mean, you can't cover a city that size with 2 people. And I was talking to one of my good friends, Chief Drew Diamond, the former chief of Tulsa. And he was saying to me, he said, if it were down to that, he said, you really ought to have the chief and the assistant chief and all on the street. I mean, you can't just have a city that size with only 2 people. It's really kind of sad what's happened to Flint.
And that's not uncommon still.
Yeah.
One of the things that happened is the Mott Foundation was underwriting some police officers, but that funding went away.
Well, and even what happened during that era was the Mott Foundation gave $5 million for community policing in Flint. And the idea was it had to be used for extra officers. It couldn't be used to replace and supplant existing ones. And at the beginning of the grant, they had a certain number of officers, and they had the identical number of officers at the end of the grant. The city was literally so desperate they couldn't do it. I mean, budgets were so tight. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing, I'm afraid, in Detroit. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with the new emergency manager. And I do know that today was the day that the big ship was coming in to try to start removing some of that pet coke from the Koch brothers that's on the side of the river. And I know some activist friends who are going to go down there and try to keep an eye on it. Actually, that may be more dangerous to move it almost than to leave it where it is.
Where are they going to take it?
I have no
That's
clue.
what-
If we're not lucky, we'll be looking out at the Grand River and downtown. Well, let's hope they're not coming our way.
No, they could. First, they can't get it up
They
here.
can't get it up here, I
They
guess.
could go to Bay City.
They could go to Bay City, yeah. Well, be on the lookout.
Huh.
I don't know where that traveling pet coke is going to go. But it's an exciting era. The other thing, when a Detroit native, Mark Fidrich, The Bird, there's another book.
Yes. Well, there's only one other book besides this one. He wrote an autobiography right after baseball. So it'd be about 81 he wrote his autobiography. This is a biography about Bird that goes into great detail about not just his baseball career, because it would be a short book. He only played 5 seasons, really only 1 season. And so this is a book about him growing up. It's a book what he did after baseball. And you learn more about him than he was just a guy with real frizzy hair who got down on his knees and dressed the mound and things like that.
Is
Talked
he
to the ball.
worth more than that? I mean, I hate to ask that, but I mean, I don't know enough about him to know whether maybe those were the most interesting things about him.
That's a good question. His book reads like it is. He is. I mean, I think the storyteller does a good job of telling a story about just a kind of an outstanding athlete who was less than an average kid. You know, kind of a troublemaker. He was from a very rural community. This was in an era of baseball before the mega salaries, really. So, I mean, he was probably started at $16,000.
Oh, my goodness.
Something along that range. All he wanted to do was play baseball in his life.
I was interviewing Dave Deal many years ago. He's a farmer out in Dansville, and he was an early Detroit Lion. And I said, well, I bet you wish you'd made the salaries they do now. He said, yeah. He said, you know what I made my first year? I said, no. I made enough to buy a cow.
He spent wisely. He spent wisely.
That was how he calculated, I think, his entire income. You know, if it was enough for a cow, then he'd play. You know. So, yeah, you didn't get rich in those.
No, you didn't get rich.
No.
It was right before the massive salary increases. But it is a very entertaining book, I have to admit. I read it just in one setting, and I mean, I was fascinated by the Bird. I think anyone that saw him was fascinated.
Did you see him in person?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
I did. Now, one of the interesting things I did not know is his first nickname was the Mad Stork. So if that would have stuck, that probably wouldn't have worked. The other thing I learned from the book was that, well, he came from this very, very rural community. So when he came to the big city, Detroit, he was kind of a fish out of water. But he was able to draw in the 25 games he pitched that year, 1/2 of the entire Detroit Tigers attendance.
Really? Wow.
One player. They didn't come to see anyone else pitch. They were
well, that
awful.
was true. Yeah, even people who didn't like baseball came.
Just to see him.
Yeah, he was that.
He was charismatic.
Unusual,
He was
yes.
a charismatic player, and it wasn't a put on.
Right.
Players liked him because they knew he was genuine about who he was. It's kind of interesting. Probably you'll never see it again. I mean, you will never. Too many handlers and PR people, and just
Most of the stories coming out of sports recently have been bad news about the players, not good news about the players,
right.
Unfortunately.
See, and I think that's why a book like this will be popular.
Yeah, I would think so.
He is going to be here at 1 p.m. Saturday, June 29th at Schuler's of Okemos.
That is Doug Wilson is his name, the
Yes,
author?
Doug Wilson, and he's going to be joined by Jesse Goldberg Strassler.
The announcer for the Lugnuts.
Who's written the book on the language of
Oh,
baseball.
that's great.
Those two should be really fun.
That should be.
Jesse, in his own way, is the Bird Fidrich of announcing.
Yes, he is. Yeah, he has his own following.
He's funny.
Yeah, he's great. Well, that'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
It's a great thing for summer.
Well, we are also joined this evening by our monthly guest, Eric Schertzing, the Ingham County Treasurer, and also the head of the board of the Ingham County Land Bank. And I know Bill's been waiting to ask him some questions about the new bike share program. I know you have. You've been asking me.
And one of the reasons was
I didn't have answers.
We were in New York recently, the day they launched the bike,
Oh,
the
cool.
zip bikes or whatever.
City bike,
City
CITI.
Yeah, city bike, and they were everywhere. I mean, it was
Not anymore. They took out 30 racks.
Yeah, they were immensely
in the rich neighborhoods.
Yep, they're immensely successful, but they hadn't worked out a lot of the bugs with the software. But I don't know if this system that you're going to introduce even has a software system to run it, does it?
Well, there is. This is what I'd refer to as like a fourth generation technology. So those kiosk systems that Washington, D.C. and New York and Minneapolis have, you've got a fairly expensive kiosk with a bunch of bikes in it.
Like 50, 60, 100?
The A2B bike share program, this is a startup from Ann Arbor, young U of M grads, is a smart bike dumb rack. So the technology for the rental and the release is on the bike itself with a solar charger over the back wheel. And this is new. I mean, this is a beta program, both for Lansing being the first bike share city in Michigan.
Is it really?
And for this to be the company and really the implementation of this fourth generation technology, this will really be where it starts.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
You aren't going to use that stupid software.
Ann Arbor didn't beat us to this? I mean, it sounds like an Ann Arbor idea.
Ann Arbor looked at this company and they chose to go with one of the more, as I understand it, one of the more established players. That system isn't operational yet. That's going to be next year.
So how does it work? If I walk up to a rack, where do I find them? What do I do? How do I pay? Where do I have to drop them off?
We're gonna start out with 20 bikes and 40 racks. There'll be some up in Old Town, Rio Town, City Hall, and along Michigan Avenue to the east. Not a huge territory, but a nice startup territory. You might have a membership. We're doing a kickoff fundraiser at Clark Hill on Wednesday night to get charter members. We're still in some of the fund development, stages of this, but it's going along well. You could do a day pass, and then there's hourly charges if you go beyond 30 minutes, because it's not meant to be this, take the bike for the day. You want to have a lot of turnover and usage within that corridor where the bikes are. So the bike will be there. You can do it with a credit card on the bike technology. You can do all the sign up and the rental, and go on your way.
And how do you find me if I steal the bike?
Well, there's a tracking system on the bike. We'll have your credit card to get it released, so it's going to cost you.
I see.
You're
Okay.
responsible for it, and that's how all of the systems work. It does need to go back in one of the dumb racks, but we're going to have an
It's kind of a smart dumb rack then.
Well,
it must have a way of locking it.
It's just a locking mechanism that's built into it. Just the cord that hooks into the bike. The bike will know if it's locked in. Eventually the technology on the bike will allow you to know how many miles you went, how many calories you burned. It'll give you directions if you want to find a coffee shop. All those things are going to be right on the bike.
Wow. And do you get a helmet as well, or do you have to bring your
You
own?
need to bring your own helmet.
Okay.
That's one of those issues that hasn't been figured out.
People don't like to wear them.
They don't share it. Sharing helmets doesn't work well.
Icky.
That's probably true, but I don't know that I just walk around normally with my own bike helmet without a bike.
So this is something we've been working on for a couple of years. Lynn Martinez has really been a godsend in helping the land bank and the folks that are putting this together move it along. The city of Lansing's helped out a lot, the land bank and the Dolmac Foundation, the bike folks up to Mackinac.
How would you rate Lansing as a bikeable, walkable city? Is it doing pretty well? Is there a lot of work yet to be done to make it easy for people to get around the city that way?
There's a lot of work yet to be done, but I think that work is taking place at a pretty satisfactory pace. Ann Arbor has more bike usage, but we have a lot. East Lansing, because of the university, is a little bit higher. But I think we're ripe for it. We're the state capital. There are hundreds of thousands of people through here every year because of the university and state government and all the things that go with it. So what better place to start bike share in Michigan than in the capital city?
That's very cool. Now, Bill, tell me, because you keep track of what's been happening in New York, they bounced out the bike racks in all of those different upscale communities.
Upscale neighborhoods, yeah. They just
What was their argument? Why would they want them gone?
Classism.
Yep. They're attracting not the people they wanted there.
That strikes me as so strange. I mean, I would have thought that the affluent would have actually been. I mean, it seems to me to be biking as a sort of in the left-right division of the world. Isn't biking one of those lefty things?
It's a lefty thing, but it's not affluent like in New York neighborhoods. Those people have got $2, $3, $4 million condos.
In certain affluent areas.
have to be right up. This is Andrea Billups joining us.
In certain affluent areas, you have subway connections that are not as fabulous as they are in certain other areas of the city. For example, there is no subway that connects into Georgetown in D.C., for example. You got to walk out and pick up.
They fought that.
Farragut, I think, is the one. And then in the Upper East Side of New York, navigating the subway is far more difficult, at least to me it is, than it would be on the West Side, perhaps, by comparison. And I would guess those are the people who do not want a bunch of bikes in there outside of their co-op buildings.
Oh, well, that's kind of too bad.
You know,
Then let them not have any.
The cab system in the Upper East Side of New York is non-stop.
True.
The people, if they want to go somewhere, they pay a cab.
That's true.
And the bus.
Yeah.
A lot of people use the bus.
Yeah.
You know, here what we're trying to figure out, obviously it's a touristy thing, and then there's just your casual users. But you know, can we appeal to the apartment dwellers in their 30s that don't want to schlep a bike up and, you know, down to the apartment,
Oh, that's good.
or there's really not room where they park their car, or that's not convenient. And we've got some good feedback just on a preliminary basis. You know, we started out this a couple of years ago where we had 1,000 people respond to a survey and built a heat map where in this corridor they like bikes. So we're using all that stuff that we've been building on for the past couple of years. There's going to be a fairly significant stepping up of the press. This has got a rollout of August 4th for 3 months. So it's coming soon. The bikes are ordered. The first payment's been made.
Now, do you take them off the street when the weather gets inclement in the winter?
That would be the plan, yeah.
Okay.
This is a 3-month. We're doing August, September, October as this demonstration project. And then we hope, we don't know, you know, we got to see how this is received, but we would hope to roll out a much more significant program next year. We've got some different funding streams lined up that will come online next year.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan.
Well, say a tourist that comes into the Radisson would be able to take a bike and go on the river trail.
Yeah, you know, we'll have information there, hopefully right in the packet that they hand out at the, you know, at registration.
I was amused. I have friends who live in Chicago, and they're doing well enough that one drives a Porsche, the other one drives a Mercedes. But when they lived in the thick of it down by the, it wasn't Wicker Park,
Hyde Park?
close, one of the nicer neighborhoods, Belmont areas where they were, they never moved the cars anyhow. It was so hard to get a parking spot. They would do everything. They'd take cabs instead of taking their own cars so that they get to places. So bikes would work well, you would think, for people in affluent neighborhoods. Get around, leave their car where they don't have to worry about it. I think they just wanted to see it, you know, rather than drive it, or maybe only for long trips.
Well, so, you know, go out of town.
I guess that was what it was.
You don't drive cars in New York City.
Yeah. You know, the other thing I wanted to get in for the community stuff for folks that plan ahead a little bit, Reuter Fountain Park in the downtown area across from the library, starting July 10th on Wednesdays for July and August, there's going to be music in the park. That's an initiative that the Downtown Neighborhood Association and some of us have been working on for a couple of years. So we were delighted to have music in the park there by the city. Thank you, Mayor Bonero, for that. And then on July 10th, we're going to kick off. Pencil that in, folks. Pen it in. And come down
what
to
kind of music?
You know, it's a whole range of different folks, which Mighty Medicine is going to start us out on July 10th. Jen Sigbert is going to do one of them. Mighty's going to wrap us up. The Fascinators, I don't know them, July 24th. Mike Scory is going to be there with Liz Bonotto on July 17th. So a nice selection was lined up for folks. Many folks just don't know that beautiful fountain sits there in the downtown. Too many trees, it's kind of hidden.
In Reuter Park?
In Reuter Park, the fountain is just blazing.
I was only there for the Occupy movement, and it wasn't going then. It was.
They shut it
winter.
off. Late October it goes down.
I've always thought it would be some value to trim those trees up.
You know, I have been on Rick Kibbe in the Parks Department on that for a couple of years, and it just hasn't happened yet.
Well, I don't want you to get away without discussing with me, because I wanted to give you a bit of an update. We have been talking in the past about Jackson National Life and the excitement out in my community, and I have a very biased view of this because I lived on Sand Hill Road, and they're creeping their way down Sand Hill Road. You were telling me about how, you know, I was very upset about their sort of pressuring the community to do a kickback and not charge them their property tax, even though they had agreed to do so, which is what we're seeing from a lot of large corporations nowadays. The new wrinkle in my community, although it doesn't directly affect me, it affects some of my neighbors, is that their new data center, which they mistakenly, somebody at a meeting mistakenly announced wanted to put it across the road because I guess it's kind of ugly. So they don't want it too close to their own headquarters. They want to put it behind the people who live across the road. And so the people who live on Sand Hill, my neighbors who are going to have this behind them, are not uniformly thrilled to find out that after promises that that area wasn't going to really be developed much, they're now going to have a new imaging center going back there. And the other thing that they've done that's kind of peculiar is that because you deed that portion to the city of Lansing, so it's no longer property that belongs to Allerton Township. It is Lansing property, even though Lansing is nowhere 7 miles away to get to Lansing. That you will not, the residents will not be allowed to hook up to water or sewer because only the Lansing residents will. So unless you deed your property to Lansing, you don't get the benefit of the $3 million of state money that's going in to build the sewers. Now, doesn't that seem that if state, I mean, isn't that peculiar? Are all 425s this odd?
I think most of them are pretty unique, and this is unique in its own way. I think it was a couple million was the state money that went in to build the water line. That was, before the building went in.
Right, but there's
a
new 3 million.
The 3 million, I think that's mainly for transportation upgrades there at the interchange for the additional traffic.
Oh, I was told that was for new sewers for the new headquarters and the new facility.
Just on site, and it wouldn't be running anything new into the site. Because it was plumbed for more development there originally.
Doesn't it tend to be then that it puts pressure on the edge community around a 425 to start deeding land over to it? Doesn't that lead to a sort of mission creep where?
It hasn't here. I know there's been 425s in Mount Pleasant in some areas in the state, and I'm not familiar with the history there. It only runs, I think it runs for 50 years, and there's some 50-year extension option on it.
Oh gosh, well I'll be there to vote it down.
Well, that just is to say these things aren't permanent. Time passes. The next generation comes along.
One after that.
And if they don't want to pay the full bore of taxes, maybe they inside of that 50 years won't even want to be there. The worst thing would be to have an empty building.
That is what
that was
the
threat, I
always,
suppose.
of course, that's always the threat. Yeah. I mean, that's what all these communities end up with.
Well, I think I probably get in trouble for this a little bit, but the companies like that, and they're a wonderful company. We're blessed to have them in the community. They're here because of the quality of the community to live, work, and play. And then for they and others, Meyer has been, rife with it, all the big box stores, to fight us tooth and nail on the property taxes that support the community's quality of live, work, and play. It just flies in the face of logic so much. I'm greedy as somebody that wants to retire, I suppose,
Yeah.
But as a citizen of the community, and we're all citizens of some community, there's got to be tax revenue to support the programs. And the corporate culture has just changed in unfortunate ways.
Yeah, I mean, I can't make those arguments, even though my house is screwy and nobody else would want it. I'm the only one that can live in it comfortably. That doesn't mean that I can stop paying property tax on it.
I've got a small garage that I can't get a big car in. Would that be obsolescence?
Yeah, see, it's that white elephant problem, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the challenge nowadays, is how are we going to find the revenues to do all the things we want to do in our cities and in our communities? So it is getting to be tight out there.
And it's a little easier for a community like Lansing that has income tax to go along with some of these arrangements because they're hoping to make it up on income tax.
Eric, what's the schedule for teardowns this summer?
Well, we don't have the resources to do as many. I think we've got funding in line for about 50 or 60 of them. We did 100 last year. But we do have single family and some commercial properties coming down. The one of note with a little more controversy to it perhaps is the blight elimination dollars up at the School for the Blind that'll take down the cottages and the dining hall. And if nobody comes along, I guess it's going to do the auditorium also there on Willow.
Are we going to do a graffiti on the any of those buildings before they come down the way you did with the deluxe
They're
motel?
not really primed,
No,
for that.
that was
And
so cool.
it wasn't. We still get residual benefits from that.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah. Anything else on the horizon we ought to know about?
Land Bank has a new executive director about a month, Jeff Burdick, who worked at the Genesee County Land Bank, so he might be familiar or want to get a. Maybe I'll get him a copy of Teardown. Maybe that'll be one of my gifts to him. He's a planner by nature. The first executive director of the Land Bank was a numbers person, Mary Rutan, and brought us what we needed as a startup organization. But I think Jeff's planning skills are really going to help take us to the next level that I think is needed, is the right spot to be in, and I think it'll be well received by the community. We're fortunate to have the master plan recently adopted by the city, so we have the plumbing in place to begin to rebuild the corridors.
One final question. How many homes does the land bank own here?
Well, we've got about 925 properties. There are probably structures on 300, maybe 350 of those. The treasurer foreclosed this past year on another 250 properties that we've been out looking at, and that's got another 175 structures. So the tax foreclosure problem isn't getting better. The inventory of the land bank will continue to creep up. That being said, I've closed on 24 houses, fully renovated or new houses already this year, and we've got sales lined up on another 20. So, sales activity is good. Things are moving along.
Well, good to hear. I keep checking Zillow to see what the prices are doing in Lansing. They've been holding fairly steady and creeping up a little bit, so that's not all bad.
We've had a number of sales that crossed the $100,000 threshold, which people wouldn't have expected.
The book Teardown, one of the things that the author talked about is he saw the upside and the downside of the land bank, but he said the downside would be if they weren't there, the predator realtors would be in buying these, or the investors.
Oh,
we see very much of that in Lansing.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of what's still holding up some of those foreclosure numbers. I mean, I had folks lose 10 properties, somebody else lose close to 20 where they were in, bankruptcy, some of the last gasp of it. We don't have anywhere near the problems that a Flint or Detroit has. But, blight is insidious, so anywhere you can prevent it is just a good thing.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thank you.
And I would like to introduce our audience and move my little cam on the webcam. For those of you who are interested, you can go to LansingOnlineNews.com and watch our webcam at the same time. This is my friend Andrea Billups, who is also a journalism instructor and who has been a writer in the past for Washington Times, and she's still doing work for People magazine. I remember when you had, what was it, the Kardashian scoop you had for People that was for their website and got more hits than...
Gosh, Bonnie, I can't even remember. There have been so many
Oh,
Kardashian
I know.
stories.
I
I
know.
can't even keep up myself.
There's an endless supply of
every day.
Although I must admit there has to be something wrong with a person who doesn't give a child a middle name. Just Northwest.
I'm sure it's coming down the pike. It's just not on that birth certificate.
It should be North by Northwest.
I know. That's what they're figuring. Maybe that's what they're going to add at a later date. But I wanted to talk to Andrea about sort of the changing landscape in journalism, because she and I have both been watching. We both teach students and try to prepare them for this rapidly changing world where you have to really sort of learn how to hustle to get a job, and you have to have not only writing skills but all sorts of multimedia skills nowadays. You really need to understand where the web is headed. But it also seems to me that journalism is undergoing a sort of wrenching transformation from the old days as we're seeing new pressures. Probably the capstone issue right now for a lot of people is, I don't know if you watched the interplay between David Gregory yesterday and Glenn Greenwald.
I sure did watch
But Meet the
that,
Press,
yeah.
wasn't that a spectacular clash between two different cultures?
I thought it was epic and fabulous.
It was indeed. Well, let me ask you. So, what was your take on what happened? Well, tell our viewers a little bit. Glenn Greenwald is the former lawyer. I don't think he does much lawyering anymore. Who started out as a blogger, and he went to work for Salon, and now he's with The Guardian, and he's the person who has been working with Edward Snowden to reveal some of the information that he brought to us about the government secret surveillance program. And boy, the two of them went at there's no love lost between David Gregory and Glenn Greenwald.
Well, allow me to step up and say straight away that I don't think that exchange would have occurred at all had David Gregory gotten the scoop. Then it would have been an entirely different story.
Oh, interesting.
Here is my disenchantment with media. you have the same 20 people, usual suspects, who are in the ring.
Yeah.
David Gregory among them, and nothing against David Gregory. But you also have a lot of journalists out there who are sick and tired, I think, of the fealty. They are a different brand, sort of the fealty of media to government, sort of the softening of, well, I think you've seen a lot of that during this current administration in terms of Washington reporting. And now, I mean, thankfully for journalism, I read somebody posted on Twitter today, and they said that they had put the Washington Post and New York Times reporters back in business because both of their stories with regard to Mr. Snowden had at least 10 bylines on them. So I'm all for working journalists. But, this guy, Mr. Greenwald, fascinates me because he is not one of them.
No, and he would very rarely get to the microphone. Bill Maher put him on a few times, and I watched him on Bill Maher's show, and it was interesting because he even made Bill Maher nervous.
I love him because
he's uncompromising.
He's uncompromising, and he doesn't give a rat's patoot.
Yes.
What these people think of him. He doesn't want to be a David Gregory. He's not trying to be in David Gregory's seat.
Yes.
And he's also very invested in the bottom line here. Just what is our government doing to us? And when is somebody going to step up and say, are you not concerned, people? I mean, are you so pacified in suburbia, sitting out there, that you don't care if the world is listening in on you? And I mean, I've thresholded myself. I mean, I am. You might, if you're my Twitter follower, you'll see me once a day type something that goes, "Run, Ed, run."
Yes.
And
I do run Snowden run, but it's the same.
Unabashedly, I don't know what Mr. Snowden's motives are with regard to releasing this information, but I am very happy that somebody like Glenn Greenwald stepped up to the plate, and his publication, The Guardian, let him write this and invested that time to let him get this story. I mean, rarely do news organizations, if it's not snap and tweetable and postable on social media,
right.
People aren't given time to do these types of things now. I mean, I thought it was a marvelous exchange. I mean,
it highlighted to me everything that has disturbed me about the mainstream media for a long time. And it is this idea that it isn't really, I think, and people have mistaken that they have one bias or another. It's that their bias is that the people in power are the people that they owe their fealty to, whether it's corporate leaders or government leaders, and that's my concern, is that they give them undue deference. If you're the poor schlub out in the community who does something, you're going to get grilled. But if you're one of the Washington elites, no matter which party you may be from, you're going to get a certain deference that others simply don't get. And that's what disturbs me, because government is doing many things that I think we're finding out are really reprehensible, and that we need to have a greater system of checks and balances operating here. Our oversight committees in the legislature can't oversee anything if people won't tell them the truth.
I don't want to be preachy, but we need to be producing more journalists like
We do.
this guy who's going to step up and say,
Yeah.
What in the world are you people doing? I mean, to question the orthodoxy. I mean, regardless of political stripe, I think this president has gotten the cosmic bite from media, from national media.
Absolutely.
I mean, however you
the drone
feel.
program and the expansion that's
There
gone
have
on.
been so many things to go down. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I mean, are we taking a pass? The IRS, Benghazi, on and on and on and on. Again, no matter what your political stripe, I would expect more. I do expect more, and I want to see that kind of exchange every Sunday on my television.
I do too.
I mean, and right now
People
is
will
the
watch
time.
television again too.
Yeah.
Yes, I would, inarguably they would.
Yeah,
and
much more.
again, I'm not knocking David Gregory. I mean, he's probably got some journalism in him still, one hopes.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7. Well, I wanted to ask you that. I mean, tell me what it is that David Gregory did to distinguish himself to get the seat he has. I can't come up with anything. I've looked at his career, and I was surprised when he was chosen. It seemed to me that he was bland enough to have gotten along with many of the people in power, and I think nowadays the name of the game in Washington is access more than it is reporting. If you do a critical story, then you're not likely to get that person back in the seat again, and that's part of the challenge with that game.
I don't know what David Gregory, I can't speak to his credentials. He's really tall.
Is he really tall?
Oh, yeah.
Extraordinarily tall, like NBA
6'8",
tall.
I think, yeah.
Yes, very
Yeah.
tall.
He's
he-
noticeable then.
But I
he
haven't
looks
seen
good in
anything.
that chair. I mean, he's
Yeah.
working in a visual medium. I mean, look, look across the pantheon of whoever is in the network's seats. You go from the beautiful to the ridiculous to, I mean, it's kind of a personality equation about who gets there. And I mean, you have a lot of vacuous people, to my mind, sitting there. The problem is that the angry, feisty people are
Al Sharpton
are not
during the campaign.
are not good to look at. And so, what do you do with them? I mean, I hate to even drag it there, but I mean,
Glenn is short, and Glenn is also a little rabbity looking, and he looks a little overheated. And I think it wasn't Norman Mailer that was very surprised after he had done the David Susskind show because he felt he had simply put away everybody else on the panel. And he watched the kinescope. We're going back to the old days of kinescope. He watched a kinescope and he said, "Oh my God, it was awful," because he said, "I burn too hot, I care too much, and I sweat, and I'm angry, and those things don't play well on television. It is a different medium." But at the same time, I thought Greenwald came off very well. I mean, he was not only articulate, but his arguments were very cogent, which is, so what is the job of a newspaper person, and why would you raise the question that somehow I should be indicted?
there was a wonderful column written by David Carr of the New
Yeah.
York Times. I'm a huge fan of his for a number of reasons. Talking about, why do we eat our own? Essentially, that was the premise of this column. Shouldn't we be, at a time like this, shouldn't we be raising each other up versus attacking each other? I mean, David Gregory essentially put Greenwald's, love of country on the line in that
Yes.
in that type of questioning. I mean, I
Basically called him a traitor.
that kind of stuff really bothers me.
I see the mainstream media closing ranks on that issue as well. I mean, it seems that there is this prevailing wisdom that everybody, all the talking heads on CNN I tuned into later, and they were very critical of Snowden. I mean, there was nobody there who was
That's
defending
because he
what it was.
didn't come from their star system.
Exactly.
Now, did he? He's a complete and total outsider. He doesn't fit the mold. He didn't go to Columbia. He didn't study at Princeton, or maybe they would. Oh, maybe they would let him in if he went to Stanford.
I know.
Right?
When the first thing that it says, the first three words are high school
High school
dropout,
dropout.
Edward Snowden.
Man, it makes me love him more. Let's see, he is all of the color that I've read about his life. He's gay. He lives with his partner in Brazil. They have 11 dogs that they rescued.
Glenn, yes, he does.
And
Yes.
I'm like, fabulous, fabulous. That's just wonderful because you don't live in Foggy Bottom in a 2-3 that you've renovated,
yes.
and you aren't, partying at the ambassador's house every third Friday, that kind of thing.
So outsiders in journalism really don't have a voice.
Well, it's difficult. I mean, you look
I mean,
at,
they do more now than ever. Like
I would
like
think
what's
They can
happening,
now.
but
online
not
realm
but
has
not on
found a
traditional
voice for
networks
them.
or in traditional big time newspapers.
Well, I mean, here we go back and forth. We are more online than ever, so that does give people a voice. However, traditional media is shrinking, and
Yeah.
that
Cenk
Yes,
Uygur
yes.
didn't last very long on MSNBC because he was too critical of the administration. We see that, even though these networks are perceived as being politicized, MSNBC on the left and Fox on the right, the challenge for a lot of the people on those networks is that if you go too far in being critical of your own people, if you're willing to hold them to the same scrutiny that you hold the other side, then you find you don't have a place at the table anymore. And that's disconcerting. Because what we really need are honest brokers who say, regardless of party, I'm going to take a clear look at this. Your list of Obama sins may be different than mine. You might put more weight on Benghazi. I put a lot of weight on drones. I mean, those are the kinds of partisan issues that could divide us. But I think both of us want to see a fair hearing on any person in power who has that much power. I mean, power is the issue. We don't talk much in this country about power. But when they have the power to watch you 24 hours a day and monitor everything that you're doing online, when they can send a drone over your home and it can spy on you every time you leave and report back to people in government, and people say, well, people are willingly giving up all their information to corporations, but the worst a corporation can do is sell me a camera. Government can arrest me, not give me a lawyer, not give me trial anymore, and if I'm on foreign soil, drone me.
And that is exactly what would happen and could happen and likely will happen to Ed Snowden. That's where this guy's headed. They want this guy. They want to put him in prison, shut him up, create a narrative around his backstory, and,
Yes.
and vilify him enough to keep him in prison for the rest of his life.
And the reason that bothers me so much, they keep talking about how, well, if he had the courage, he'd come back and face the music. Look what they did to Bradley Manning. They kept him naked in a cold cell in solitary confinement for months. That's considered torture by the Geneva Convention. That's exactly what Snowden would be facing. He'd be a fool to come back
The
and do
rules
this.
are off. I mean, they're asking him to play by the rules.
Right.
Think about that a minute.
No, I mean, I shouldn't have an opinion, but I do have an opinion, and my opinion is that I find what he has done, at least on the face of it, courageous.
I do too.
And I'm scared for what he has revealed and probably will continue to reveal. You know, oddly enough, when the story first broke, where I first turned was who helped him, who has directed him, who has funded him, who has set this in motion. Because I do not believe, based on the profile that I have read of him, that he is just some rogue. I don't think this just happened. Is that WikiLeaks, which has an ever-growing global network? I don't know. I mean, Mr. Assange has been, his group at least, has been helping him, which
I think he went to them at some point along the line and joined forces with them,
What's
because
the-
it came out today that he said he intentionally took a lower salary to go to work for Booz Allen because he knew that as a contractor he would be able to get access to this shared data that he knows about and be able to reveal it.
As a journalist, I can't wait for the rest of this story
Oh.
to come out. I really, really want to know. I fear that probably what will happen is that they'll send this guy, he'll land in someplace in Latin America,
Venezuela or Ecuador, probably.
Yeah.
where I fear, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but we could buy him back.
That's worrisome. The pressure on those governments is going to be enormous. Or the possibility that I wonder if we will even see a sort of bin Laden type strike where they will go in and try to get him. Just the way that they did Eichmann when they brought Eichmann back to
I would
Israel.
not be surprised if that happened. I mean, one day he was there, and then the next day the Ecuadorian government has decided to cooperate. I mean,
What's the name of the woman documentary photographer that was the go-between?
Oh,
American
the one from
citizen.
the Washington Post? Yeah, I forgot her name. Lori Poitras?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was just wondering what her role. I think he went to her first.
Well, there are certain people you would go to. She
he
is
he
one.
trusted
Glenn
her.
Greenwald is another.
Yeah.
I think you would automatically reach out to a Julian Assange if these are the kinds of things you were going to do. But I know that I Facebooked yesterday, and I was thinking about this. We look at Aaron Schwartz, and we look at Bradley Manning, and we look at the kinds of young people nowadays that I really have admiration for, that are testing the limits and looking for ways to figure out. I mean, Aaron Schwartz committed suicide because he was being so hounded by the feds and threatened with a decade behind bars for downloading what was free information. But he was testing the system and testing the limits of the system. The kind of young, bright, technocratic geniuses that are out there, those are the kind of people that I think many of us identify with. We don't want to see them persecuted. We want to see them as the kind of people, they are the Daniel Ellsbergs of this era, who are coming to us. And he's trying, it appears to be, and he and Greenwald together, trying to be responsible and not get CIA agents killed and things like that by the information they reveal. But we need to know what our government's doing in terms of spending these billions to keep an eye on us.
don't any of these network folks seize upon a story when this thing breaks and then our government goes, oh, and by the way, we did thwart a subway attack, and they started coming up with things that justified their means, which cracked me up. I'm like, you need a backstory now, so let's create one. What kills me the most is things are going really bad for you. If you did these really good things on our behalf, thwarting terrorism, which I'm very happy about, then might you want to share that story with the rest of us? I mean, why would you hold the good news off? That violates the very tenets of basic PR to me.
To me, yes.
What's the age demographic skew on this thing? I bet younger people under 30 support him.
Well, this is why Nancy Pelosi was booed at Netroots Nation when she called him a criminal.
Yep.
Because
I
the
think
young
it's
people
huge.
at that, I don't think it's going to fly anymore. I mean, I think what we're seeing is a sort of, it's more than just an Arab Spring now. We're seeing uprisings in Brazil. We're seeing uprisings in Indonesia. I think we're seeing young people. We saw the Occupy movement here. Young people are saying, wait a minute, we want to take a second look at what's going on in our name. How, in a society where we're seeing such rising inequality, you can't just take 40% of the wealth off the table and say it goes to 1% of the people and the rest of us have to share the rest of the pie. We can't grow the pie fast enough to make up for that 40% we don't get to touch.
See, with a little bit of flash, this could be a Blade Runner. I mean, it's
No,
it's
this-
almost fiction. You know?
This
I mean,
is Tom Clancy come
Yep,
to life.
yep.
Every day I feel like we are living in a
Yeah.
Tom Clancy novel. It's not. This story is a fiction narrative, isn't it? I mean, crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah, it could be anything you see on the screen. I mean, all the spy stories, they're not that different.
And I'm sure someone is writing the screenplay as we speak.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Andrea Billups. We're talking about the state of journalism in the world and in the country nowadays. I guess that, we need reporters who say, gee, take a look at that emperor. They might not be wearing the wardrobe we think they are. We need to really find out what's happening in our name. Are we raising that young crop of coming journalists? Where are they coming out of? Are we seeing them now? Why is it that Glenn Greenwald has to be almost such an outlier, almost such a pirate to be able to do this?
I just got finished 3 years of teaching as a full-time visiting professor, as I worked as well. And I have to conclude from my own experiences that we have a crop of very passive kids who don't really understand the mission of journalism. That sounds like such a lofty thing to say, the mission of journalism. But I think they view a career in journalism as largely an offshoot of entertainment.
Yes.
I'm going to entertain myself with my writing and entertain you with all of the fun people I'm going to interview from sports and entertainment and media. And these are kids who missed Watergate by a mile, who most of them missed Monica Gate. I mean,
They haven't seen many heroes, have they?
They haven't come to understand how a press saves us, as it were.
Yeah.
I mean, that role of the press, that it is not connecting. I try to show all the president's men, they can't even get past the bell bottoms.
Yeah.
But you want them to understand that we need you, that this is something larger than you, but that is not translating to me.
Have we come up with a model that will support that kind of journalism? I mean, I'm concerned that Greenwald goes, he was never acceptable to the mainstream media at all. I mean, he was Salon and then he was Guardian, which is an international paper. I mean, are American elite publications interested in hiring the Glenn Greenwalds of the world? Do we see them doing it? I guess I don't.
For what it costs to get a Glenn Greenwald, and then give him the time to do the type of stories that he would do, is not a cost-effective equation for any publication.
Well, that's probably true,
You
too.
have got to want to invest in that type of reporting and decide that you found somebody who can deliver that type of reporting. I mean, our media is quite timid. I mean, you see it here in our state, but in many other states, too. I'm not singling us out, but I mean, it's crazy when I read coverage. I can barely look at websites here because I'm staggered. I'm like, that's your lead story? Nothing else happened here across the Great Mitten? Nothing happened to you? Was there a story today about a pet? I don't know.
There's always a lead story about a pet,
And you know why the lead story is about the pet? Because people will click on the pet.
Yep,
That's
it's all
right.
about clicks.
That's right.
And that is a
But that's
shameful-
entertainment. Yeah.
It is entertainment, and I love pets. But that's not journalism. That's kind of some kooky kind of side alley of reporting. Really? If you have 20 reporters for your news outlet, you cover half the state, not naming names, and your lead story right now is a pet story, my head explodes. I couldn't last there for 3 hours.
Yeah. I was worried the other day because I realized, can't remember, what do we get? Maybe 6 stories a year about the Michigan Supreme Court? What does it take to get a story out of that? I mean, these are the
It's
institutions.
complex, for one. It's a complex system, so it takes somebody that has a little bit of knowledge to cover it.
But they make it easy. They do
Yep.
release their opinions. It's not that hard to get
Yes,
them.
And their
but
opinions
but
affect
here's
a
the
lot of
deal.
people.
Their opinions do affect a lot of people, but in order to deliver context about what is coming out of that opinion, you need to have some background. Every year in my advanced reporting class, I give my kids a version of the AP's guide to the courts manual from the AP that talks about the federal court system in this country. It talks about terms. It
Yes.
talks about trial practice, all of those things. And the kids have no foundation, I usually make them go watch a trial, and the question always comes back, will they let me in? And I'm like,
Right.
you paid for this. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yes, yes, really. I mean, I said, you could watch somebody's divorce trial today if you so desired, you know, and
And that makes them uncomfortable. Part of the challenge with this generation is they've been raised to be very nice, and saying things that are harsh or apparently critical of people is not in their nature. We have raised a group of young people who have not had to kick and claw for every dollar, and they've come out of a relative level of affluence, at least the ones we see in college. And I think it does go against their grain sometimes to be aggressive in reporting.
I mean, it's not aggressive. I've even said repeatedly to students, it's not mean for you to question somebody's rationale about something. That doesn't make you a bad person to question whether what they've done is right or wrong. It means you're a querent. You're asking a question of somebody whose salary you paid, that it always lands back in the taxpayer thing for me. But these web outlets, they don't want to pay reporters for expertise.
No.
It's like, you're a warm body, some AP style, welcome aboard. And how many clicks did you get this week? I mean, it's like, of course they're not going to cover that Supreme Court because they have no foundation for trial practice,
Right.
Previous case law precedent.
Yeah.
It's like today we had this affirmative action punt from the Supreme Court. That's my
I
word.
think it was a punt.
Pushing it right back down there. But in order for you to truly understand what this case was about, you needed to understand Grutter and Gratz that
Yes.
came straight out of Michigan, these
Yes.
12 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But I want to know, I bet you I couldn't find 5 reporters inside this state who could explain just the basic premise of Grutter and Gratz, where this even came from. Why? Because the ones who could have left because people don't want to pay them or have just worked the ever-loving crap out of them and treated them like crap. You're losing your experts.
The people who have that, they bring that sort of context and conscience. They know the score. They've been around. They also understand that so many of my students, they really look forward to getting the press release because that's the end all be all. Those are nice polished quotes.
And there are media outlets in our state, not to name names, who write stories, 10 of them every day, based on a press release with absolutely no context. I read some of these things, and I turn into just like a mad woman. If I let myself, I would pick up the phone every day and say, on what planet is that a news story?
Right.
It is the spaghetti against the wall kind of coverage. It's like, if we do 30 stories today out of our bureau, and we'll see who's clicking on the most stories, and those will be on our homepage. And I'm just like, what? I mean, I am staggered. You're essentially regurgitating people's news without context. And here's the other rub. It's insulting to people who live here. I'm sorry, but there have to be like 10 other people like me who aren't just bloody insulted by that type of lack of depth or context. That's not journalism. It's not.
And the people that are insulted quit reading at all. I mean, I don't look at certain sites.
I've stopped reading because I don't want my blood pressure to continue
I just
to rise.
don't read them anymore.
I know. There was a study done more than one study that showed that the challenge for Americans, for example, is we're not very good at digesting international news. And part of that is we really don't have the context for understanding. If you're covering it in an episodic way, just as you're sort of covering we see the elections covered by who's up, who's down, not what it is that they might do if elected. Those are the kinds of challenges that I think we face nowadays. We have citizens in this country who really haven't been fed a very healthy diet of journalism. They've been fed the journalism equivalent of junk food, and I don't think that they know how to break that habit because it sort of ruins your palate.
And we see the back end of that every time a congressman steps up and said, the bill is 1,200 pages long. I need 2 attorneys to read that before trying to read it all. And I'm like, sir, madam, you're voting this on my behalf. Might you, have the wherewithal to understand the legislation? Because, if you don't, who is my front line? We're creating these people who are like caught in the cult of personality of things, who have no foundation for anything that goes on in their civic life, like nothing. I mean, it staggers me.
Do you think, how has the web, has it been a net plus or a net minus overall for journalism? It certainly changed the economics, which I think have put investigative reporting at risk. That's always been the most expensive kind of reporting to do. When people talk about the good old days, I keep asking them, they can usually name 2 or 3 major series that were done. It was not a weekly activity. It was not, it was honored more in the breach than it was in reality. But does the web open it up to more citizen journalists, other people? I think Greenwald wouldn't have been a journalist before if he hadn't had the web. He wouldn't have had a platform.
He wouldn't have got the job.
Yeah, I don't think he would have gotten a job. He's too abrasive.
I mean, I think the web has allowed us to share news faster than ever, and conversely, it's allowed us to be wrong faster than ever. I think citizen journalism has forced journalists to be scrutinized, which I think is a plus. I think the capacity to engage with somebody who's reading you, who might have a piece of this pie, is pretty crucial. I mean, I would have to light the atomic bomb to get some of my students off the couch and out talking to human beings. It's the old, I emailed him 5 times and he never responded. And
The email interview, the bane of my
it's just
existence.
like, he didn't respond because he doesn't know who you are.
That's right.
All he knows is you're some whack job sitting out there, firing
You're
off
a spammer.
questions. I said that's old school, having an actual conversation with somebody, but required. I mean, I think we can't hardly have these conversations. The web is here. It is now. That is the forefront of where information will go. Citizen journalism. I am all for citizen sourcing of journalism, but I still think that journalism ought to be done by people who have some sort of standard for its practice. That's all.
I would love to see universities step up to the plate and say, we have the financial resources and we have the credibility and we have the faculty that's interested in this, and we could become the repository for more investigative reporting. Because there really isn't an economic model that's going to make that viable in the commercial world, where Kim Kardashian is going to pull in a lot more eyeballs. I mean, I have a video on YouTube right now that, because one of the keywords on the bottom, one of the tags, is Rihanna, it gets an enormous amount of hits. I have people signing up for my YouTube channel that are going to be really disappointed with that Yankee Doodle Days parade in Grand Ledge, because they signed up based on Rihanna. But, I also go out and I try to cover things with video that aren't covered otherwise. And there's plenty of stories. I mean, Right to Work was a huge story here in Michigan. It was covered in a very trivial sort of way for the most part. It really didn't look at the lives and
most of the reporters that covered it didn't understand what Right to Work was.
They had to take a crash course, trust me.
Did not know.
And that sort of leads back to what I was saying. You've no civic foundation to what you're hearing here. You don't understand the history of unions. Why are these people angry? Well, because they're expressing the emotion of a culture, of a generational culture, and you cannot wave them away with some piece of legislation. That's a wrong piece of the puzzle, regardless of how you feel about this. Understand, the guy out there in his work boots and his Carhartt. He's not just a dude. He's a culture of people in this country.
The March before the bill came down, the Teamsters held a meeting on a Saturday morning, and it was snowy. And I thought, well, I'll go over there with my camera, because I knew Right to Work wasn't going to pass here. But I thought, well, I'll just go hear what the Teamsters have to say. And I heard them talk about how, well, we think that something might actually happen. And I thought, Now, it was a surprise. There were no other reporters there. Nobody bothers. They don't have staff on the weekend. They just don't have people to send. That's part of the challenge.
Can't get something covered on a weekend.
But I think we have to get a more engaged citizenry that at least goes out with a cell phone and says, let's capture this for posterity, if nothing else, because we won't have the context.
I don't disagree with that. I think that you mentioned partnerships. If I were the dean of a journalism school,
in my dreams.
From my lips to God's ears.
Yes,
right?
indeed.
I certainly would be seeking partnerships with news outlets that where the students could take on some of the heavy lifting, would help them to learn.
Yeah.
It would provide the type of investigative watchdogging that many of them are lacking, and it would be an absolute win-win. I have students who would have seriously been able to step in and do some footwork. I had some good students who absolutely were ready to do that type of work and very interested, but there was no partnership for them anywhere because they're writing the dog story.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sad but true. Andrea, I want to ask you, what is on the agenda for you in the near future? What are you going to be doing? You've written one book of fiction.
I have a book of fiction that's sort of setting on my desktop. Sitting on my desktop. I'm studying. We like to mangle the language. It's an art form. Um, so it's sitting there, and I'll, at some point I will revisit it with somebody, and hopefully publish it somewhere. It doesn't matter to me. It's quite the vanity project. I have another book that is, it's called Flip Flop Girls.
Flip Flop Girl, I know. You're
And
famous for your flip flops.
I like a good beach, yes. But I mean, this is a book about people at midlife making a flip flop that sort of
Yeah.
informs their life. And there are lots of pretty good stories about that
We
out
will
there.
get Andrea back, and we will have her tell us about flip flop, and we have all had a flip flop or two in our lives. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. Tune in next Monday. Thank you very much.